Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar on optimizing your team collaboration with Bluebeam. A couple quick reminders before we start. This webinar will be recorded and emailed out to you within a few days. It will also be available under our events page on the Microdesk website and our YouTube channels. We will have a Q&A session at the end of our webinar. If you have any questions during our presentation, please type them into the questions box located near the bottom of the Go-To panel. So a little bit about Microdesk. We are a leading AECO technology and consulting firm and Autodesk Platinum partner in the US. In 2022, we joined the Symmetry team that allows us to expand our reach globally throughout Europe. We have over 200 dedicated consulting experts that assist with design, construction, and operation firms with the goal of working smarter and more sustainably. To start us off, I would like to present our speakers today, Megan Fitzgerald, a Microdesk Strategic Implementation Manager, who will introduce themselves and kick off our agenda today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Amanda. As Amanda stated, my name is Megan Fitzgerald. I'm a Strategic Implementation Manager with Microdesk. Primarily, I work with clients, engineers and contractors alike, implementing and improving building information modeling workflows within the Autodesk AEC collection and Bluebeam environment. So I'm very familiar with all things AutoCAD, Revit, BIM 360, and Bluebeam Revu. And prior to joining Microdesk, I worked as a project engineer for almost 10 years designing HVAC systems. So I really understand the documentation handoffs for a project's life cycle. There are a lot of files and it can be quite cumbersome to manage. And as most of you know, Bluebeam Revu provides a solution for this issue. It's a powerful document editor with specific functionality for the AEC industry. It allows you to take scalable measurements, perform quantity takeoffs, excuse me, and compare documents through an overlay feature, to name a few. And built into this tool is a cloud-based platform called Studio, which I'm going to talk about today. And Studio provides a common location for files to be shared, marked up, edited by multiple users. And it should be noted that it doesn't just host PDFs, but rather any window-based file extension. And before I jump into the details of today's webinar, I'd like to discuss a few topics. I'm going to discuss the features of Bluebeam Studio and its different collaboration environments. Shortly, I'll jump over to the Revu environment to highlight those features and walk through how to set up a Studio project in a Studio session. I'll highlight the best practices for each environment, and we'll look at the different configuration settings, how to manage, add users, check in and out documents. And lastly, I'll show two additional web-based platforms for your use, which are the Studio Web Portal and the Bluebeam Cloud Portal. The Bluebeam Cloud Portal may be new to many users as it was just released in September of last year. Not only can it host all of your documentations like you would in the Studio environment, but offers additional functionality to manage construction project documentation for RFIs, punches, and submittals. Before I jump over into the Revu environment, I just want to talk about subscriptions. And the reason that this is important is because it'll affect what you can and cannot do within the collaboration environment. Depending on your role and responsibility, you may need to create or initiate new Studio projects and sessions. And you can only do this if you have a core or complete subscription. You cannot create new projects within a basic subscription, but you can be added to a project as a team member to create and add markups. And to clarify, there's no difference between the core and complete subscription as it relates to Studio. The complete subscription rather offers additional advanced functionality as it relates to batch automation and exporting project data to different file formats. The fourth user option that we haven't talked about. What if your project team member or stakeholder doesn't have a Revu subscription? Well, not to worry. They can still be added to the project or session, even if they do not have a subscription or a Bluebeam ID established. They will simply receive an automated email as shown here. It will invite the user to join the Studio project or session. Also within the email, it'll ask the user to create a Bluebeam ID if they haven't already done so. Additionally, they can download the Bluebeam review software from the link indicated, which is the bluebeam.com/download website. And just to kind of highlight, I say what that looks like. I can jump to that later. But basically within that environment, you can just download an executable to install your Bluebeam software on your local machine. As a non-subscription holder, the user will have read-only functionality within the project environment, and they can really only view and download documents. But within a studio sessions environment, which I'll get into shortly, a non-subscription holder can have the ability to collaborate and add markups. I guess this is a good opportunity to jump over into the review environment. So as you can see here from my screen, I'm actively viewing a PDF file. And the first thing that, as a user here, I can see that I have no additional icons up at the top tab. So as I hover over kind of this top tab here, it tells me that I'm viewing just a PDF, which is on my local file. And you can see the file path of where that's specifically saved. I also can see here that I have full functionality within my markup editor. If by chance that this functionality within my markup is grayed out, it would tell me as the user that I haven't applied my subscription to my review session. You may ask yourself, well, where do I do that? Well, if I come up to the top ribbon here, this is where I find my account information. And from this drop-down list, I've signed in with my Bluebeam ID. And with that ID, I have a subscription assigned to my account. In this particular instance, you can see that I have the package complete or the complete subscription. If you're a non-subscription holder, instead of saying basic, core, or complete, this would just simply say unpaid. So this is where you log in and assign that subscription in your account details to your Bluebeam review environment. So within this, we have an additional portal of which we want to sign in to our cloud-based environment. And we can do so by coming over to the left-hand ribbon, and we're going to look for that house icon. In this case, it's up at the top. And this basically is my, I'm just going to sign out here just to mimic what it would look like to sign in here. So this is where you have a secondary interface to sign in with your Bluebeam ID. I'm going to go ahead and initiate that. But I guess before I do so, I do want to just bring to your attention that within this drop-down list here, based on my location, you can identify which server you want to sign into. I'm located outside of Boston, Massachusetts, so I'm going to go ahead and accept that US-based server. So I'll go ahead and sign in here. And before I sign in with my Bluebeam ID, if you haven't already created your Bluebeam ID, you can do so in this portal here by inserting your name, email, password, and such. And then by creating an account, it'll auto-generate an email to that email that you've listed on file for you to basically confirm your credentials. For then now you would be able to come in and log into the platform. Let's go ahead and insert my username and ID here. And now I'm logging in to my US-based server, and we can see the projects and studios of which I have permissions for. So the first thing to, I guess, look at is that now that I'm signed in, we're now actively within my studio panel. Excuse me. And I have different kind of permissions and things I can modify from this interface. Firstly, within the studio drop-down list, I have another place to look at my Bluebeam ID and the server that I'm signed in at. And this is also the location if I needed to sign out or re-sign in with a different username for various reasons, you would do so here. And to the right of that, I can see an icon that looks like a rectangle with some squiggles. This is basically my icon to toggle my studio projects kind of interface here. And next to that is an icon. I kind of compare it to like a whiteboard on wheels. Think of sessions as this a little bit more agile. So it's something a little bit more mobile. So this is where I can interface with my different sessions that I have available to me. And just again, another interface to see the Bluebeam ID that I've signed in on is this location here. Kind of jumping back to my projects, as that's what we'll start with. I also have the ability to filter out the two different, in this case, you can imagine this list can become quite long for all the projects that a user may be assigned to or be initiating, where I can actually have the ability to filter out between projects that I've created or initiated, or projects that I'm just added as a traditional team member or user. And within each project or studio within each project or session environment, you're given a unique 12-digit ID number, which you have the ability, if I needed to create a new studio project, you can do so with this plus icon. And as I mentioned before, if you're a basic subscription holder, you will not, the ability to create a new project will be grayed out, but you will have the ability to join a project. And this is where, based on the how the user preferences are established for that project, given the 12-digit unique ID number for that project or session, you may have the ability, which I'll get into shortly, to simply enter that 12-digit ID and add yourself directly to the project. But it's only with the ability, which I'll get into shortly, that it's an unrestricted user project or session. So I guess this is a good opportunity for me to jump into the 12 Maple Ave project. But one of the things I guess I want to highlight is this icon up at the top here that I hadn't really talked about. This is just a kind of an icon symbol that represents 2 plugs and to show that we're in a connected environment. And this is just a visual way to see that I'm actively connected to the internet, but not only that, my Bluebeam Review software is actively connected to the internet as well. And the reason that this is important is because based on how projects work in the collaboration environment, in order to update and mark up documents, you need to be able to check them in and check them out and see what other users are doing as well. And in doing so, it involves a live internet connection. So I do have the ability to work in an offline environment and to look at my projects, but I'm essentially going into a read-only functionality of that project. So if I was to click this, it says, would you like to work offline? And if, in some fashion, if you lost internet connection or you were in a place that you just wanted to review the project documents on an offline environment, you can, but you don't have the ability to actively collaborate. Like I said, it would be in a read-only environment. So what we can see here is that we have the 12 Maple Ave project, which I've double-clicked on. And one thing that's interesting about basically the rows listed below, this tells me that I have 3 active sessions associated with this project, and we'll get into those sessions shortly. But when I had clicked on the 12 Maple Ave project, it opens up a secondary studio project interface. And I've kind of set this up to mimic a project that's in the design phase, where I'm mimicking like the different design submissions of schematic design and development, CDs and such. And I've manually established these folder structures by within this environment. You can add different documentation and set up folders. So in this case, I had created new folders as such by typing in, I can just call that like a test folder, and you can see I can actively add a folder. I can also have the ability to upload files, and this is where you can simply, like as you would any type of traditional adding file structure, I can go in, and in this case, it's pathing to the last known file path within this program. In this case, it's just a file location on my C drive. So I can go ahead here and add files at my choice. But one of these nice features is rather than going individually selecting each file, if I wanted to upload an entire kind of like PDF repository, I can actually go in and select upload folder, and I could select, like for example, if I had said at the sample project, I have sheets, I could actually upload the sheets select folder, and it will upload all of the subsequent documentation and keep the folder structure alike. So it's kind of batch uploading where you're not manually having to go and identify each one individually. So we can see that I've kind of already gone through those steps for this discussion today. And at the very top, I just wanted to highlight that we not only have the ability to upload PDFs, but we can upload different types of file formats. For example, you have DWGs and Excel files, which can be very useful in a project exchange. And one of the things you might think of, like when I double click this Excel file, is it going to view the Excel file through the Revu interface? And the simple answer is no. What's actually doing, I say, is it opens up on my other screen here. I'll bring it over. It opens up the software that will view the file format in its native environment. And one of the first things to bring to your attention, up at the top here, you see a read-only note, which is that because I haven't claimed temporary ownership over this document, I can only view this in a read-only session. And this goes, again, to all kind of documents, PDFs, DWGs alike. If I was to wanting to edit this Excel file, the first thing I have to do is basically by right-clicking, I can check out this document for my temporary ownership. And as doing so, you can see I have an additional icon to the left of it. And this is telling me, and it will tell other users within the Studio project environment that instead of them seeing a document with a down arrow, they will see kind of like a character icon that they can say that someone else is consuming or temporarily owning this document because they're editing it. So one thing that's unique about Studio projects in that one person can only be in a file or document at one time. You cannot have multiple users editing an Excel file or PDF because through the only way to edit a document is by basically checking it out for saying I'm claiming temporary ownership of this. For now, when I open this document, I no longer have the read-only functionality, but now I can say I can go ahead and delete a row here in a similar workflow where you might use the command, Control S, where I'm now saving this. And now I can close out. And now your question might be, you're like, well, am I saving this automatically to the cloud? Or, I guess what synchronizes back to my cloud-based environment? So I say, what it's doing is it's actually taking an instance of that cloud-based file and it's locating it on this, basically a location on my C drive, which you can see is under app data, local, and roaming. And basically when I check the document back in, it's taken all of those, my local file, and basically in a similar kind of analogy to like, for those who are familiar with a cloud-based, a Revit collaboration project, it's taking your local file and you're synchronizing it to that cloud-based repository. So I can actively check this back in and it's pushing those changes back to my cloud-based repository, and I can call this, Megan updated. And I can go ahead and check back in. One of the things I guess I want to show is as I say, I wanted to continue making changes to this document because it wasn't done. I can easily check back out, but there's an additional, I say, synchronizing changes to the cloud. It's, if I was to check in, I would basically push those changes to the cloud and then relinquish ownership over that document. If by chance I wanted another team member to actively see the progress I made with editing or commenting or marking up a document, I could update the server copy. And in doing so, it would still allow me to maintain ownership over that file, but it would push the changes I made to date to the server copy for others to review. So if I was to say update server copy, and I could say, review in progress, I can go ahead and check back in. And by checking back in this particular instance, I'm momentarily checking back in where you can see that said push the changes, but then it went back and consumed this document to be in a checked out function. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and say, we're done, and we're going to check this back in for kind of a third time here. And now we want to look at some other, I say PDF design documentation within this project environment. So this is where I can look under my design and development, and I can see that I have different folders mimicking my different disciplines, where I can double click on the architectural, and we can go ahead and look at the original documentation. And this is where you can see I have 9 PDFs assigned within this folder, and I actively may want to edit and view one of these documents. So I can just go ahead and double click. And it's going to ask, do you want to view this particular PDF in a side-by-side mode where it's just going to be to the right while actively viewing your studio project? And I'm just going to go ahead and say yes. That's basically, if I had said no, basically this tab would sit above this one. It's kind of just personal preference. And I can kind of just minimize this to see a little bit more here. So I'm actively wanting to add comments to this, PDF document here. One of the first things that we're going to see is that my markup ribbon over to the right is grayed out. And the reason for that is that, as we just showed with the Excel document, I haven't actively checked out this document for my consumption, comment and review. So I have 2 locations of which I can check out this document. One is I can just click on the locked icon up at the top tab, and I can say check out. And additionally, I can come over to the project interface, and I can do the same thing. In this case, I left click, and I can say check out. Now it's temporary. I'm temporarily owning this particular PDF. And now I kind of double click or click once within my window. I'm now activated within my A201 tab. And now we can see that within my markup ribbon over to the right, I now have full functionality to come in here, and add markups alike. So I can, add some comment where maybe, I need to, I'm an architect and I'm reviewing this, and they need to, shift door to the right. And I can also, add highlights or tick, reviewing something to say, yes, I approve of this, and, I finished in this particular instance of reviewing this particular document. In the same fashion that I was able to check back in and basically push these changes back to the cloud, same workflow that you would for an Excel file as you would this PDF. So this is where I can, I have that ability to update the server copy if I just want to show an in progress review, or I can say, yes, I'm all set, and I can check this back in. And again, this is where I might call this revision, Rev 2, and go ahead and check back in. And one of the things that's interesting is that because I have this particular PDF open as a viewer within my Revu, I say browser, I have a locked icon. If I was to close out of this PDF, it basically removes that lock icon because it's basically saying that I'm not in a read-only functionality. Additionally, if I was to right-click on this, this PDF, I can actually see a revision history. And this revision history is, you can see that, I've checked in and checked out this document a few times and made some edits. If other users, had checked in and checked out this document, you would see their Bluebeam ID, with the comments of changes they made. And if by chance you needed to roll back a document, you can actually click one of these options. You can actually open a previous revision. And you can see that I've now opened a previous revision. I can go ahead and close out. I can also, in the same fashion, go to revision history, and I can say, restore a revision if I needed to make that in the current one for various reasons. And one of the things that is, so the revision history is specific to the Bluebeam environment, but there is something, within this, I say architectural folder, I've actually mimicked where, you have your original submission here with your 9 drawings, and then you say, okay, I need to make a revision of just 2 of them. So in this case, I've created a subsequent folder to show revisions. And if I was to look at, I say open one of these PDFs, you can actually see that within my, Revit environment, I've actually, have a separate revision within my title block here. So one of the ways to manage, I say, the different drawing revisions in addition to managing markup revisions within Bluebeam is a specific functionality called sets. And I like to highlight this because not only is it powerful outside of the studio environment, but also you can use it to basically create a relationships of your PDFs within a studio environment. And I'll just kind of highlight how you would do that. So I'm going to go ahead and just close some of these documents as well. So one of the first things, so you're going to look for basically a stack of kind of documents is like your little icon here. And what it's going to do is basically establish a relationship of like standalone PDF files, and you're going to group them in some fashion here. So this is where I can come up to sets, and I can say new sets, and I'm going to go ahead and say add. And one of the kind of neat features here is that I can actually look at the documentation that's in my cloud-based collaboration environment. So I can actually see the folder structures. First of all, I can see the 12-digit unique ID, which is telling me that I'm in my 12 Maple app project, and then I can see the different documentation, and I can path to the folder that I'm interested in. So in this particular case, I can go ahead and just highlight in bulk, all of those 9 files, and I can go say okay. And then what it's going to do is basically, add these to this project. And one of the things to note is that there's actually some smart features in here that it sees certain text fields within this PDF document, and it knows that A201 is a sheet number. And because I've already initiated this for the very first time, it automatically applies A201 to sheet number and the architectural, or sheet name to the sheet number field. And if you ever needed to change that, there is this auto mark functionality where basically it's saying, please highlight here within this particular PDF where my sheet number is. So this is where I'm going to go ahead and say select. And I'm just, within this kind of drag and highlight feature, I'm saying that this text in this particular location that is in the identical location in every PDF is going to represent my sheet number. And in the same fashion here, I can auto mark, and I'm just highlighting this because I've already done this once. It knows the regions of the PDF to pull this information from. But if you ever needed to change it, you would come here, and reinitiate. Like for example, if your title block structure has changed. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Now within this architectural set here, and the reason that it defines this as an architectural set is not because I had some subfolder that I pulled it from called architecture. There's actually a mapping between the first character A here and defining this as an architectural set. But now, like just to showcase how I had two drawing revisions that I want to add to this set, I'm going to go ahead and say, I just want to add those two different drawing folders to the set here. So I'm going to path to that file, and this is where I want to add these two particular revisions to the set here. And what you're seeing here is that the next sequential number is 1, only not because it knows that it had a RevCloud 1 within my title block. It just sees that as the second instance of this PDF. So if I click OK here, what it's doing is that basically, so in doing this actually, I was actually, I'm just going to go ahead and say, this is what, I apologize. As I was doing this, I created a new basically set. So what I actually wanted to do is, I'll kind of do this here a little bit, but it's just thinking over here because now that, let's see. So what it's actually doing over here is that it's basically seeing that there is duplicate files. So let's see, I'm just going to close out because it's being, just do this quickly over here. Because it's seeing that there are multiple files with the same drawing number, and it will basically make it easier to see different revisions of those drawings. And then basically in coming here and say add files to set, this is where I'm going to path to that folder. You can see here now there is a revision 1 at the bottom. And then this is where I guess you could also see the mapping where I had a previous instance of A202. It sees that there's a new A202 based on that mapping of the PDF locations. I'm going to click and say OK. The reason the reason that it's bringing up that little warning is because I had a checked out. And I guess I just wanted to highlight this is now you actively see a nice clean set of all of your unique drawing instances, in that if I was to click on this drawing, I can see that I have a previous revision of this particular drawing A202. Similar to like A204, I can see here that this says, revision 1 in my title block. I now have the back arrow ability. And as soon as I click on this, it actually puts a superseded watermark to tell me as a user that there's a more, recent, revision of this particular drawing. You can actually actively go ahead and say, save this to us. If I did, basically save set as, I can then save this within my studio environment for other people to access. And it just creates kind of a nice clean feature to see all of the subsequent drawing revisions. And I guess I say that just to differentiate, there's revisions within the markup editor functionality, and then there's a way to also manage drawing formally issued revisions from a documentation set perspective. So I guess I'm going to go ahead and just close out my sets functionality, and I want to jump back into my my studio project. And this is where I'm going to actively just come back at 12 Maple Ave. And we were talking about all of the documentation within, you know, my 12 Maple Ave project specific to the architectural. And as I created a set here, you can see that, you know, these drawings are checked out because I've actively overwritten them from my set environment. But I guess one of the other features I want to highlight is that within this project, you can actually take PDFs that are hosted within your projects, and you can create breakout collaboration sessions for which multiple users can edit in real time and add markups. And I like to think of this as a, you know, so it's within this ability, you can actually take PDFs, like I said, within your project, and you can create a studio session from them. And I just want to highlight this icon where basically it represents, you know, the same icon on the top ribbon here. This is telling me and anyone else within this project that these PDFs are actively hosted within a breakout session. So if I was to double click this PDF and say, yes, I want to view this in the side-by-side manner, I can see that it has a locked feature because I haven't, I say, checked in or temporarily claimed ownership over that PDF. And one thing to note is that you can't steal or, you know, take someone else's ownership. This particular PDF is owned by a session, so I'm not able to check it out or, you know, take ownership over it until it's released from that session. So the only thing I can do within the project environment is just look at a, you know, read-only view, because you can actively see, you know, the locked features enabled, as well as my markup ribbon is grayed out to the right. And one of the things to also note is that you don't have you have the ability to check out and claim ownership over multiple drawings at a time. It's not just one-to-one. So you could check out you know, as many drawings as you like. It's just kind of being mindful of what you're checking out, because other users aren't able to make comments or edits until you've checked them back in and you're released control over them. So kind of looking you know, back into, you can see that there's this kind of whiteboard-esque functionality. Just to kind of repeat myself, this is telling me that these particular drawings are actively in a session. I can also see, you know, from this project or my studio panel here, and if I was to expand the drop-down list here, I can see the different sessions that are associated with this project. And there's different ways to kind of interface or activate your session. One is I could double click here and it'll bring me to my mechanical design review session, or I can just change my studio environment, which would be from this icon here. And now I can double click, you know, within the mechanical design review. I'm going to activate my session environment. Maybe this is also where I want to just kind of close out some of this additional documentation that I have opened. And in doing so, it seems to be, just took a minute to think, but now I'm actively within my session environment. And I like to think of a session as basically, it basically creates a space for users to, in real time, mark up a document. So think of it as like a, you know, you're holding a virtual design review where multiple, you know, disciplines, stakeholders, owners could actively be, you know, invited to the session within like a, you know, a Teams or Zoom environment where you could actively share your screen, and multiple users, you know, assuming that they're logged in to their studio session, they would be able to see real time when other users are marking up and editing a document. So for example, if I interface with my, you know, markup editor tool, I can real time, you know, add markups, you know, add comments to the different design documentation. And one thing it's also doing is it's creating a record of all of the different, you know, changes and comments made to this session. I can look at this at the end of your breakout session. You can actually generate a report, and I like to think of this as a supplemental meeting minutes record of everything that happened in that session. You can generate this when you finish your session. So one of the things I haven't talked about was, basically your session settings and your project settings. And in both the kind of environments, it looks like a little, abacus kind of function tool up at the top ribbon here. And this is where you have the ability to see your session name, your 12-digit session ID number. You can see kind of the number of users, the number of files, all of that. It's also recommended that a session always kind of have a finish date, because it's kind of a breakout session of maybe it's just exists for the 2 hours that your meeting is hosted, or it's you give all of the team members, say, hey, within 1 week can you review these documents. Then we want to close out this session and push those PDFs changes, I say, back to our project environment. So it's always kind of recommended that you have like an end date in mind to notify those users of when those review sessions need to be complete. And at the next ribbon here, this is where you would add all of your user attendees. So this is where I may add my colleague. I can add him here. I also have the ability to apply him to a group as such. And I have the ability to control kind of the permissions in a global environment. For one, anyone default added to the project is considered an attendee. So by default, they have just permission to save the documents, download them directly to their computer. If they need to have a local copy, they can print, markup. They can also create markup alerts. And this is where you may want to restrict majority of the users from like that full control where they can't add or delete documents. But if I want to add a particular user group, I can do that here. And this is also I could then define what type of user, I say deny, but then I want to, basically come through here and select the functionality of their permissions. In this case, it seems, it's like a 1-by-1. Let's see. And I can go ahead and say allow. And this particular interface is similar to the project permission interfaces as well. And I guess one of the things I just want to bring to your attention is this toggle where it says restrict attendees. If this is toggled, it only allows the users within this attendees directory to be added to the project. If I had said unrestricted, it would be given that a user had this 12-digit ID number, they would be able to add themselves to a particular session or project alike. Where I could come over here to the add feature, I could come to say join, and I can enter. I would say I'm the owner of this particular session, so I'm not able. It would be a duplicate effort to then add myself. This is where I would come and add myself to the project, as long as I unrestricted the attendee access. And kind of jumping back over, I say to this project, this is where you might go through and in real time. Create markups and go through like a virtual page turn environment. And then at the end of the session, you basically want to capture those changes and push that design documentation back to your project. So you have the ability to say update project documentation copy, and you can push these changes back to your project-based environment. I can also say I can temporarily leave the session if I need to engage, with a new session environment. Additionally, after that like design review, meeting has been complete and you want to close out, you can actually finish the session. And this is where you're given another interface to say, save overwrite existing. This would basically be the global way to push all of those markups that you created in your session back to your project-based environment. Additionally, if you didn't want to overwrite those drawings, but you wanted to create like a breakout, folder, whether locally or in a server location, you could save those, I should say, session markups within this area here. So I'm just going to go ahead, and say save overwrite existing, and it's going to edit the documentation within my project. But one thing I guess I want to highlight, you don't just have to create a session from a project. I could create a standalone session and just upload drawings just to create a virtual design space for collaboration. And then in doing so, when I went to finish the session, it would see that I didn't initiate these drawings from a previous project. So it would just indicate that I need to download these PDFs to a file path of my choice. But now that you can see from this session interface, I no longer have access to see that I've closed out this session. So I guess this is a good time to also highlight one of the Bluebeam Studio environment. And this is where I've already logged in with my Bluebeam Studio ID. And this is just saying I've timed out. And this can show me every session that I have created. You can see the ones that are active here. And I guess I bring this up as a good example for one, if you've mistakenly closed it out, or if you say, hey, I actually want to reinitiate it for give users more time, I can actually click this and I have the ability to say activate, and I can say update data. And in real time over here, I can come back to my, my sessions environment, and as long as I say refresh, I can actively see that this session environment is now able for other users to continue with their markups. And kind of going through what functionality you have between the Bluebeam web portal, you can see it just gives you a list of all of your PDF design documents. You can see all of the attendees. In this case, I hadn't actively invited any other users. But one thing that's nice is that if at one point you are, as the project owner, are transferring ownership to another user, this is where you can apply their username, and it will transfer ownership of that session to that other user. And again, the Studio web-based portal is just an interface to view all sessions. It doesn't have the ability to look at projects. And subsequently to that, there is an additional platform that was just released as of September of last year. And anytime you have a Bluebeam Revu 21, which is the latest, release of the Bluebeam software, anytime you have a subscription to that platform, you will automatically have access to the Bluebeam cloud environment. And within this, you can initiate projects. And one of the things I should highlight is that it will be able to see documentation that you've hosted to your Studio cloud, but it won't automatically initiate them within the with this environment. For example, if I go under drawings here and I go to say add drawings, I can browse files locally on my C drive as I would, in any other kind of application, but I also have the ability to say import drawings. And this is where from this interface here, where it says from Studio, it can see that I have a Studio project here, and then I have the ability to, select my Studio cloud-based drawings that I've uploaded. But it doesn't, at this particular time, it doesn't have an automated sync. It's something you mainly have to go and retrieve it, but there is an ability to see your Studio projects, for example. And just kind of continuing on through this functionality here, you can see that there's additional functionality on top of just hosting your documentation to create punch lists, manage RFIs and submittals. So I just highlight this as a new software that was just released, I think in last September, just to say it's another platform that comes automatic with your Bluebeam Revu 21 software. I know we've kind of gone over a lot of information, but I'm happy to answer any questions at this time.
Great. So we did have a question that came in. It says, when you're finally done with the set, are you able to download the set so that you can submit it or send it to someone that you don't want to be able to edit the PDF?
Yeah. So this is where under my project environment, let's see here. I'm manipulating over to my project environment. You can say you can download, individually, you can download a copy of that project for, further sharing or consumption if you needed to, remove it from your, collaboration environment.
Is there a file size limit to what I could host in either of those environments?
And there is actually, within the sessions environment, this kind of just shows you the differences between studio sessions and projects. And file size, within the sessions environment, you're limited. I say, getting back to that file here. Apologize. You're limited to 1 GB file size within sessions, and you have unlimited within projects. You can also see there's a few other kind of functional differences where you're limited in a sessions environment of only 500 people, but I like to think that's way more than enough than you'd ever need within a collaboration environment.
Great. Another question that came in, if we have Bluebeam on our machine, does that mean I have the ability to use Studio?
It does. So Bluebeam Studio automatically comes with your your Bluebeam session here. And the way to interface that would be, over on the right-hand ribbon, there's like a house icon that allows you to log in and interface with that cloud-based environment. But it is I guess, a free tool that's provided, or it's just provided with your Bluebeam Revu software.
And another one, Megan, are there security issues using the cloud for non-disclosure agreements that you know of?
And that's something that we'll have to look into and get back to.
Okay. So last question I see, what happens during inactivity during a project?
Activity, so as in, like when I'm actively creating markups within the, let's see here, I'm actively looking at so like, for example, if you're actively within a project environment, we could see that, well, I should say, when we're actively within the sessions environment, we can create a record of changes. So you're saying within an activity, we do have the ability to, let's see here, I'm looking at one of these drawings where I want to look at, like I showed the revision history. And I guess, are you looking to see the, activity of a particular drawing? I guess it was, let me try to properties here. So an activity, so this will kind of show you the activity in regards to, when people check in and check out. But in terms of the unique activity of like when someone physically added a markup, the better environment to see that activity list would be in the sessions environment. Hopefully that answers your question.
And then another question, did you say that there are instances where more than one person can edit a PDF at the same time?
So the only ability where more than one person can edit a PDF is within a sessions environment. That the functionality of a sessions is to mimic like a virtual conference room where multiple users can actively be in the session in real time. If Jack was to, my colleague was to put like a tick mark in the upper corner, I would actively see that live on my screen. So that ability to edit multiple users in one document would be your breakout sessions. And within a project environment, only one person can edit a document at a time, and that's through that checked out. You have to check out or temporarily claim ownership over that document.
Great. Well, I don't see any more questions right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch a quick poll for everybody. If you have any more questions or would like one of our team members to contact you, please answer yes to the poll and we will reach out shortly. So I'm going to leave this up just for a minute. All right, perfect. Again, if you can also visit our website at microdesk.com to learn more about the products and services we offer. But that will wrap up our webinar today. Thank you, Megan, and thank you all for taking the time out of your day to join us.
Great. Yeah, thank you all.